Hi, everyone. We have the pleasure and we have welcoming Mike Wolf today. Mike Wolf is an investor for over 25 years in real estate, and most importantly, he is Canadian from Calgary. And Mike has spoken around the world, including the Rich Dad Company, the Canadian Real Estate Wealth, and he's been featured in the Globe and Mail, Yahoo Finance, and numerous radio and TV shows. So we have the pleasure today to speaking to Mike, and then hopefully he can answer some questions for us. Hi, Mike.
Hey guys, how you doing? Good to see ya.
Great, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. And how are you guys?
Oh, well, Jennifer and I, we are very happy to have you today. So hopefully you can enlighten us and answer a few questions for us and for our audience.
I'm gonna try my best for you guys.
Awesome, awesome.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. So the first question, Mike, most people will probably think about if I'm a beginner right now in real estate, is it still a good time to invest in real estate?
You know what? It is absolutely always a great time to invest in real estate. Obviously, the market's going to fluctuate, but you got to remember that we have a very large planet that we live on, and there's tons of different markets. It's, when there's never been a day in the last 25 years I've been doing real estate where I've woken up and said there's nothing for me to do today. There's always opportunities everywhere. And so in my opinion, the sooner you start, the better. And unfortunately, a lot of people use things, they say, oh, well, because of the economy, it's not a good time, or because of this, because of that. It's always a good time to get started. There's always opportunity out there, and it always beats having a 9-to-5 job, in my opinion. So yes, it's a great time to get started in real estate. And, the U.S. is still on sale. There's a lot of amazing opportunities down there. And that's where I focus most of my time, as you know.
Oh, great. Thank you for that answer. Now, I'm sure there's some people that are more seasoned on the call. They're probably asking, as a seasoned investor, why would we want to work with you, Mike?
Well, you know what? Even seasoned investors, there's a million different ways to make money in real estate. And I have really good friends. I've shared the stage with a lot of very sophisticated investors, and we all help each other. So, for example, I love single-family homes. I own single-family homes all over North America in a bunch of different cities. And that's my expertise. But if I wanted to go buy an apartment building, I'm not going to go do that on my own. I'm going to go talk to somebody who's an expert at apartments, or if I want to do a mobile home park, or whatever it is I want to do, I'm going to go talk to somebody else who's an expert in that field. So I get a lot of very sophisticated investors, especially from Canada, Australia, South Africa, all around the world. I deal with investors that want to learn how to invest in the United States, and they're an expert in their home country, but they don't know how to navigate south of the border. And that's one of the things that I have become an expert at by doing this for, I've been investing in the U.S. for probably around 12 years now. Before the recession even kicked in, I started off in Las Vegas, and that's what I'm an expert at. So it doesn't matter how successful you are at what you're doing. If you want to try something different, it makes a lot of sense to have a mentor or somebody to guide you through the different landmines and help you avoid some of the really costly mistakes. And trust me, I've made a lot of them along the way. So I know what not to do.
Great. Yeah, I definitely agree that having someone that guide us is definitely helpful, for sure. So Jennifer has something to ask you, Mike.
So as Canadians, why should we invest in the U.S. instead of Canada right now?
Yeah, several reasons. One is it looks pretty much like Canada is inevitably going to go into a recession. Obviously, we're a resource-based country, and with oil where it's at, that's certainly not helping, especially in places like Alberta, where I'm from. But our currency is getting very weak. A lot of people are predicting that we're going to head into a pretty major correction going forward, number one, which will actually create opportunities. It might actually make sense at some point where I might be helping Americans buy Canadian real estate. But right now, that's not the case. The U.S. is still on sale, number one. So homes are a lot cheaper. We're dealing with homes in Atlanta. That's one of my favorite markets, where I couldn't build the home for what I pay for them. You couldn't rebuild it. If it burned to the ground, the insurance company would have to pay more to rebuild it than what I'm paying to buy it. So that means that the properties are definitely undervalued. The U.S. is coming back. A lot of the markets in the U.S. have already made some really big leaps and gains, such as Las Vegas, Phoenix, Florida, a lot of other markets as well. But there's still a lot of other opportunities. And so we're seeing Canada right now, Canadians have more debt than we've ever had per capita in our history. And we've been managing it really well up to this point because of really low, record low interest rates. We're managing it. As the mass inflation and hyperinflation kicks in, things are going to start to change. And people are going to start to lose their toys. It's going to trickle down into the real estate market, unfortunately. In the U.S., they have a lot less debt than they've had in a long, long time, not because they paid it off, but because a lot of Americans lost their homes and a lot of them went bankrupt, and they're starting with a clean slate. I'd much rather start with a clean slate than a whole bunch of debt. So we're going to see the U.S. continue to come back up. We're going to see Canada likely coming down. But that doesn't even cover the most important reason. The absolute best reason, and even if the prices were the same and the economies were the same and everything was apples to apples and oranges to oranges, the one thing that is so much better in the United States is something called the 1031 exchange. And the 1031 exchange is basically a law that says that if I were to sell a property in the United States, there's certain guidelines and rules, so don't go do this without knowing all the guidelines. But in general, if you have a home and you sell it in the U.S., you take the proceeds and you reinvest it in more real estate, your capital gains are going to get deferred. In Canada, every time you do a transaction, you've got to pay capital gains on it. And so you sell a property, let's say you bought a property for $100,000 and sold it for $200,000. You're not going to have all $200,000 to play with on your next purchase in Canada. You're going to pay capital gains tax on that $100,000 profit, and whatever the government leaves you over, you have to invest. In the United States, I'm going to have every single dime of that $200,000 to play with. How much quicker could you build your portfolio if you don't have to pay tax on it every time you do a transaction? So that is the single biggest reason amongst many of why the U.S. is so much more strategic for an investor right now.
So there's some excellent points that you shared with us. So if we decide to invest through you, how do you ensure that your properties will have low vacancy rates?
Well, vacancy rates are actually, when I'm picking a market, because I'm not investing close to home, you see a lot of people promoting stuff that's in their own backyard. And the reason they do that is convenient for them. I'm not promoting Calgary properties. I'm going to where it makes the most sense. And one of the things I look at is obviously things such as the vacancy rates and return on investment. Where can we get the best results? Where are we going to have our money working the hardest for us so we don't have to work very hard anymore? And so we look at all that. But even within markets, there's tricks that I've learned in my 25 years of doing this on how to keep the vacancy rates even lower. And so one of the things we do in Atlanta that's a little bit different is we're doing 3-year lease options. So if you were to buy a revenue property from me, the tenant that's moved into your property has signed 2 contracts. The first one is a 3-year rental contract, and the second one is an option to purchase that home. And that option to purchase is typically 50% more than you paid for it. So if you paid $100,000 for the property, your tenant will have signed a contract giving them an option to purchase that property for $150,000 within 3 years. Now, what that does is now these people have given a deposit, which goes to you, non-refundable. They know that. And now you have somebody in the home who wants to, typically our typical tenant for this project is somebody who used to own a home prior to the recession. The recession kicked in, they lost their job. For whatever happened, they lost their home, and now they're starting over. And anybody who's ever owned a home does not want to become a renter. So there's a whole market of people that want to get out of the rental market, get into ownership. And so we provide a win-win solution where I can help you as an investor to get really good returns. I can help them get back into home ownership, and also it helps me because I obviously get paid for my services too. And we all win. We create a win-win-win. But ultimately what it does is it really reduces the vacancy, because vacancy is the single biggest enemy of a buy and hold investor. Every time your home goes vacant, now not only do you not have revenue coming in, typically you have expenses. You're going to be cleaning for sure almost every single time. And then quite often you're going to have to repaint or change carpets. It really erodes your bottom line. And so with this project, the tenants tend to stay there for a long time, 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, if they exercise their option, you've now made a 50% gain, capital gain, which, as I mentioned earlier, isn't necessarily taxable if you do it right. And then you've got 36 months worth of cash flow payments. And so your returns on investment are a lot higher than a traditional rental property, especially if you don't have a good team. I mean, that's a whole other story. But we have different things in place, such as that program that really absolutely reduce that vacancy rate and leave a lot more on the table for our investors.
Great. Wow. What a great insights. Thank you so much. I know, Mike, we know that a lot of Canadians are worried about the loonie dropping quite fast, and a lot of questions about the exchange rate. Can you elaborate a little bit about what you do about exchange rate? How do you maximize on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to say don't use your bank to exchange your money. I have people on my team, and I'm happy to share them with your viewers. Get a good currency trader. They'll save you a lot of money, number one. We don't have a whole lot of control over where the dollar is going to go. And, you know, with our economy being what it is, our dollar is probably going to get weaker. And we had a really good opportunity where obviously the dollar was at par. But for the people watching this who didn't take advantage of it when it was at par or the time before it was at par, it's going to be a while before we see it go back to par again, because it was very artificial. That because the U.S. was suffering so bad, their dollar was getting weak. It wasn't that our dollar was strong; it's the American currency was weak. And now the U.S. is coming out of the recession, and we're not going to see them with a weak currency, you know, most likely for quite a while. So, but you know, the real answer to that question is that when we buy real estate, we're buying it for the long term. We're not buying it. You know, we're not buying it for 2 months or 3 months. So the currency is going to fluctuate. It's not likely. I mean, if you're investing in it 75 cents, it's not like, oh, it's going to be $1.10 by the time I'm ready to sell, and I'm going to, you know, lose all this money in the currency. It's more likely. A lot of analysts are actually predicting a 60-cent dollar, by the way. But even, you know, historically, what we see is a Canadian dollar that sits around 75 to 85 cents is pretty typical. And the reason for that, especially with you guys being in Ontario, is our manufacturing industry. Nobody in the States wants to buy our goods if our dollar's at par. Our stuff isn't a good value to them unless it's on sale. And how it becomes on sale is by having a weak currency up here. So our government does what they can in their power to keep it around, you know, 75 to 85 cents. So bottom line is, even if you lost, let's say 10 years down the road, the dollar is, you know, you took out 100,000 and you lost 10,000 on the exchange. Well, you're not really going to care too much if you made 100,000 or 200,000 on that property. So the bottom line is these properties are on sale. They're deeply discounted from where they should be. And if you hold on to them and do what I tell you to do, which is collect cash flow, buy strategically in smart markets, collect that cash flow, wait for the market to do its thing, that currency is going to be a minor blip. And actually, believe it or not, it might work in your favor, because it might even be weaker than it is now. And that's what a lot of people are predicting. So there's never going to be that perfect storm where all the homes are on sale and the currency is where you want it to be, and you know all these planets are aligned. That doesn't happen. There's always going to be something stopping you. So if you're using the currency as something that's stopping you from investing, well, by the time the currency is good, the homes won't be on sale anymore. That's going to be your excuse. And bottom line is you're never going to invest. You're going to be at your JOB for the rest of your life. So it's time to jump in, take the plunge, and I'm here to help people to do the best we can. The currency, like I said, we have no control over, but we have a lot of control over where we invest, how we invest, and getting into the right markets and getting the big profits, so that even if we lose a little bit on the currency, it's not going to be a big deal. It's going to be a minor blip compared to the upside.
Wow, thank you for that excellent answer, full of details. Thank you, thank you. And in terms of taxes, that's probably a question that the listeners always ask themselves: is there's tax in Canada, tax in the U.S.? But let's just ask you, Mike, how do I minimize tax investing in the U.S.?
Well, as I mentioned, of course, the 1031 exchange, excuse me, I'm dying here, in and of itself is a really big advantage. Obviously, not having to pay capital gains is huge. Excuse me. But also importantly is that even besides that, if you are set up strategically, you can basically pay less tax doing the same transaction in the U.S. than you would in Canada. The U.S. in general has a less punitive tax system. And even as Canadians, we could take advantage of that, but we have to be structured properly. And that's one of the things that I help Canadians and other foreign investors do, is to be strategically set up with the right entities to take advantage of that. And it's not one size fits all, where I can just, if it was one size fits all, I'm not trying to hide the answer from people. I would gladly tell them, but I'd be doing them a disservice, because everybody's in a different position. We all have different strategies, passive income is taxed differently than earned income. If you're flipping properties, it gets taxed differently than holding, depending on what you have for assets, what you have for liabilities. There's a whole bunch of different potential scenarios that are more strategic for different people. And so I would have a conversation. I always have a conversation with my clients to give them the best advice I can. And then my clients are entitled to a free strategy session with one of my cross-border accounting specialists who can tell them exactly, confirm what I say or disconfirm, because that's what they do for a living. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. So that's my disclaimer. Obviously, I have a lot of experience dealing with this, but I'm not qualified to give you the definitive solution to that. So I then will direct you to the people who do have the right designation after their name, and they'll tell you the right solution for you. But the bottom line is, if you're set up properly, you will actually pay less tax doing the exact same transaction in the US. If you do it wrong, that's not going to be the case. So once again, really important to have the right person mentoring you and walking you through it who's actually been doing this themselves. Because remember I said earlier I made some expensive mistakes? Well, some of my expensive mistakes definitely have to do with taxes. So over time, we tweak things, we figure things out, we get better people on our team to give us better advice, and then we get better results. And so once again, one of the things I always like to tell people is don't believe anything I tell you. Go and verify and do your due diligence on me, do due diligence on everything I say, and then make your own decision based on that. But I can tell you based on experience that you will pay less tax in the US if you structure things properly than you will in Canada.
Excellent. Paying less taxes is something I'm sure all of us are interested in. Now, can you share, are there any other ways where we can maximize our returns on the investment?
Well, really how you maximize your returns is one, you have to pick the right markets. I'll give you a really brief course on how I do that. So when I'm looking at markets, most people say, oh, well, I saw this stuff in Ohio and I saw this stuff in Detroit, and man, they're getting me 30% returns. Well, those are what we call paper returns, meaning they look really good on paper. And, a lot of people are very tempted to buy cheap homes. And when you buy cheap homes, you're usually buying yourself a lot of headaches. It's kind of like buying a cheap car. In theory, it'll still get you where you're going when the car is working, but buying a cheap home usually means you're going to have, in a bad neighborhood, means you're going to get bad tenants. And bad tenants means high vacancy rates, a lot of damage to the house, a lot of stress. We get into real estate investing to create a lifestyle of freedom for ourselves. At least that's why I got into it. I didn't get into this because I said, oh, I love drywall and windows and, I'm in love with homes. I don't love homes. They're just a vehicle. They're a means to an end. And I've used real estate to help create freedom. So if we're trying to create freedom for ourselves and we're buying in the wrong neighborhoods, if you're buying the wrong home, you're going to need a lot of repairs. If you're buying in the wrong neighborhood, you're not going to get appreciation. You're also going to get bad tenants. No good tenant wants to move to a really crappy, crime-ridden neighborhood. Nobody wants to go there. So you're automatically getting bad tenants. And then you're attracting bad property managers, because if you're in a neighborhood that gets low rent and they're getting 10% of the rent, they could go to a nicer neighborhood and with less work, dealing with better people, better people that are more likely to pay and deal with less hassles, they can make a lot more money. So the good property managers don't go to those neighborhoods. So now you got a bad home, bad neighborhood, bad tenant, bad property manager. You're going to have a bad life. So it's really important, one, to pick the right city. And how you do that, number one thing I look at, first of all, is it a landlord friendly or is it a tenant friendly place that we're dealing with? And so I want the government to be on my side. I want them, if I have a bad tenant, I don't want them to say, feel like, the poor underdog tenant, he shouldn't have to pay. You're the rich guy who owns a piece of real estate. I've never had my bank once ever say to me, Mike, you don't have to make your mortgage payment until your renter pays. I've never once had anybody feel bad for me that the tenant's not paying or damaging my house. So if I'm in a place where, like California, for example, if you get a bad tenant, they can live in your home for, I know of cases where they've lived in a home for over a year while they were damaging the property and not paying any rent, and the judges ruled against the landlord. I don't want to go to a place like that. So number one thing I look at is that. Is it landlord friendly or tenant friendly? A place like Atlanta, generally we can get rid of a bad tenant in 3 weeks. I don't care what they say to the judge. They're gone. 3 weeks, they're gone. And I can now go re-rent the property. So that's number one. Number two thing I look at is, where am I going to get, where's the appreciation going to come from in the future? And so that usually comes from people moving there, population growth. And people move for a number of reasons. People will move to a new city if there's jobs. So number one thing I look at is job creation. I'm looking at population growth. I'm looking at demographics. And I'm also looking at the diversity of the jobs, because if we look at, I'm going to pick on Detroit again. If we look at Detroit, one industry town, automobiles. So that the automobile industry is in trouble probably forever. It's never going to be competitive. The unions are too strong. The wages are too high. You bring in imported cars, and the costs are a lot lower. So they have to actually put taxes on these cars to make them less favorable when they get here, so people actually still buy the American cars. So in any case, the bottom line is you have high unemployment. Unless the city reinvents itself, there's not going to be anything that really changes. It's going to change it drastically. So I'm always going to look for a place where there's a diversity of jobs. Right now, if you go to Alberta, where I live, Calgary is really feeling the pinch of the low oil prices. Fort McMurray is becoming a ghost town. And it was one of the most expensive places in North America not that long ago. So once again, we have one industry, and Calgary's not one industry. It's a little bit diversified now, but it's mainly governed by oil. So you contrast that with Atlanta. Atlanta has the same reason why they attract me as a landlord, because they treat us really well. They treat all businesses really well. So they give a lot of tax breaks to different companies to do business there. So Atlanta is the head office to a whole, I believe it's 75% of the Fortune 500 companies have an office in Atlanta. So, but it's head office to Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, Turner Broadcasting, Home Depot. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on, which means that if Coca-Cola shuts down the stores, which I don't think it will anytime soon, but if they did, now your tenant has another place they can go for work. They have other jobs. And so that's the number two thing. And then the number three thing is what most people go to first, and that's a return on investment. After I go through those options, because I don't care how high your return on investment is, if you have a tenant not paying and you can't get rid of them, your return is going to be negative, because you're going to be losing money month after month after month. So if I have those other fundamentals in place that are protecting me, and also giving me a really good chance of appreciation, because that's where we get wealthy in real estate. It's from the appreciation. Cash flow gives us a lifestyle. I love cash flow. It allows us to do the things we love to do, like travel, spend time with your kids, volunteer, give back, whatever it is you want to do. You can do that if you have the cash flow. But if you have appreciation on top of that, that allows you to not constantly be digging into your bank, your pocket and your bank account to buy your next property. If your properties are going up, the property you buy today will help you buy another property down the road. And that's really the key to building. When you see people with large portfolios of properties, it's not because they've got this job and they keep saving up, X amount of dollars for down payment. They're actually, their properties that they bought are helping them buy more properties. And those are really the keys. Really, if you stick to those fundamentals, you'll never lose. It's very difficult to lose, because even if the property goes down in value, who cares? You still have this cash flow coming in every single month, and you're just not going to sell, but you're in a good position. You have a very sustainable business model. When your property goes up, then you do sell, you cash in, and if you do what I do, I'll sell one home in whatever city I'm in. Then I'll go buy two in the next city in the city that's underperforming, but getting ready to take that leap. And that's really how I made my money over the years, is by doing that.
Wow, definitely some very valuable insights that you've shared with us. And so can you tell us how you are different from other turnkey operations?
Well, I'm different in a number of ways. The biggest thing is, like I said, I'm not picking a market out of convenience. I'm not saying, well, you know what, I live in Calgary, so I'm just going to promote turnkey properties in Calgary. I'm an investor myself, and I'm actually invested in the markets that I sell. And so I understand the market. And so my clients don't have to be watching the markets, because when I go and sell my properties, I'm calling up all my clients. I'm giving them free mentoring in addition to selling the property. They're not just buying a property and then they don't hear from me ever again. I'm actually there to help them. Number one. Number two, like I said, I'm invested myself. So as I strategically move my money, I'm calling up my investors and saying, listen, it's your home. You can do whatever you want. You're not obligated, but I'm going to sell my property now. I'm going to move to this next city, and gives them an opportunity now build their portfolio strategically without having to watch the market all day long. And one of the most important things is that the same team that's managing my properties will be managing your properties. And here's where it makes a really big difference. I had a call a number of years ago. I used to do a lot of stuff in Phoenix back when it was a great market to invest in. And I got a call from somebody who wasn't yet my client. And she goes, Mike, you're always talking about Phoenix, and it sounds great in theory. I bought a property there, and my property manager, though, we've had this property for 4 months. He can't find me a tenant. Are you having trouble finding tenants? And I go, no, we have like the opposite problem of that. We have too many tenants. We need to get more properties. And so I said, even though you're not my client, I'm going to do you a favor. I'll send my property manager over, and we'll put a tenant in for you. And so anyway, the property manager goes over to the property and gets there, and there's actually somebody living in the home who'd been paying cash, and the property manager had been pocketing the cash. And so one of the biggest problems we have as foreign investors is that we don't know, we're not there on the ground. We don't know what our team is doing. And so you have no leverage. You have one property. You have very little leverage typically in a market. And so the property manager didn't really have that much to lose. He lost one client, big deal with one property. For him, not a big deal. It wouldn't be worth it for her to sue him because it's too expensive, right? So another really big advantage is that we're kind of like a union in a way, meaning that in Atlanta, my teams and I, we've sold over 700 homes in the last 4 years there. And so if that client had bought through me and, my property manager had done that to her, he wouldn't lose one paycheck. He loses 700 paychecks. We're his only client. So we have a lot of leverage over our teams, from our contractors to our property managers. There's a really big difference. So there's really that safety in numbers. And so we don't hold it over his head. I don't treat him like crap saying, oh, I'm going to fire you if you don't. He treats us really good because he needs us, and we treat him really good because we need him. We're in a win-win situation where if he takes good care of me, I'm going to take good care of him, and we both win, and our clients win, and everybody. That's really the key, is everybody should win. And in the case of buying one home with an unknown, people you don't know, you're really taking a lot of risk, and especially, like I said, when it's people that are investing only in their own backyard. Because it's convenient for them, and they're not buying based on strategy. They don't know the fundamentals. They're just finding cheap homes that they can get at a discount, putting up nice pictures on the internet and painting a rosy picture for you, and then you go buy it. And in any city, I'm sure in Toronto, Calgary, the same, any city, there's builders and they build identical model of homes in good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. A picture of a home means nothing. You need to know a lot more than just what the home is. You need to know the neighborhood. And so everything that I buy and everything that I sell is something that I would have in my portfolio. I'm not selling somebody anything that I wouldn't keep myself in my portfolio. So I'm not selling anything in crappy neighborhoods. I'm not selling crappy homes. I'm not putting, if somebody's not pulling their weight on my team, they're gone. I can't afford to have that because there's just too much to lose by having the wrong people. So these are some of the major factors. But I think probably the biggest thing is just the fact that I've been doing this for 25 years. And I've made a lot of mistakes, and I will openly admit that I've made a ton of mistakes, but I don't make the same mistake twice. So every time I screw up, I learn something from it, and now I apply it to what I do, and that benefits all my investors and buyers. They don't even know half the stuff, that the extra things that we put into place that other people wouldn't even know to do. And I'll give you one example, and that's. I had a home in Calgary once upon a time that turned into a grow op. So they were growing marijuana in my basement, and I didn't know much about this sort of thing until after it happened to me. But apparently they have to use these heat lamps, and it creates a lot of moisture and humidity, and it basically causes a lot of structural damage. And to get the home back up to code again, it cost me a lot of money. Like we're talking $60,000 or $70,000 worth of renovations to get that back up to code. And I wasn't very happy about that. So I realized that the best way to get rid of have a tenant like that not even move into your house is, we now put in our contracts in all the homes that both for myself and for my clients, we put in the contract that we're coming in every 90 days to change the battery in the smoke detector and the furnace filter. And the reason we do that, those things are important. The battery and the furnace filter, absolutely, really, you should do that anyway. But the main reason we do that is somebody who's going to set up something illegal in the property, they're not going to move in if they know we're coming in 90 days. They're just not going to move into the house. And that's the best way to get rid of a bad tenant, is just not have them move in. So that's just one of like a dozen different things that I've learned from my expensive mistakes that my investors don't even know they're getting in return when they buy a property that these other companies wouldn't even know to do, because a lot of these people aren't even investors themselves. They're just buying properties for cheap and selling it to somebody who doesn't know any better. and there's no fundamentals behind it. They don't have a lot of strategy with who they put on the team. They're just trying to do it as quickly as possible so they can maximize the opportunities, make as much money for themselves. For me, like I said, I'm investing this myself. I'm building a team for myself, and then the benefit for my buyers is they get to use my team.
Wow, wow, definitely. I hope our listeners are taking great notes, because we are taking great notes. And thank you for your insights again. You know, Mike, in the States, we hear a lot about lawsuits and people suing for all kinds of reasons. So in real estate, how do investors protect themselves and protect their assets?
Yeah, well, that actually is a very good question. We, of course, see on TV, you know, somebody goes to McDonald's and they spill coffee on themselves. They sue McDonald's and they get this multi-million-dollar settlement. And, you know, the big thing is, yes, the U.S. is far more litigious than Canada and every other planet on the globe for that matter. However, a lot of times the stuff in the media is one, is blown out of proportion because, you know, Starbucks, McDonald's, Walmart, these guys are all targets, because everybody knows, of course, they have deep pockets and they have a budget for settling out of court for a lot of things. So people know that's one way they can get rich in the States, is by suing somebody. Now, you and I, we're not quite as big a target, but the answer to the question really is one, firstly, have obviously good insurance on your property. That will cover 99% of the things that might potentially come up in a lawsuit. But there's also, going back to what I talked about earlier about you know, getting a good cross-border tax specialist and legal team on your getting them on your team is very important. I've got all these people, and the reason it's so important is not just for minimizing the taxes, but also for asset protection, to keep your assets safe. There's ways to protect you from just about anything that can happen. And you know, I'm very fortunate. I'm on stages and I'm in the newspaper, and been on radio and TV, and you know, it's pretty hard to hide what you do when you're putting yourself in the spotlight. And I can honestly say I've never been sued in either the US or Canada in all these years of doing what I do. But that's also by putting, you know, things in place to protect yourself. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. It's not within I could talk for, you know, 3 hours on asset protection right now. But I'll just tell you that there's different ways, different types of entities that will protect you. There's different strategies to, you know, take the equity out of your properties, for example, to make you less of a target. There's a whole bunch of different ways to deal with it. I'd be happy to have maybe create a whole different video on that topic, because we won't get to any of your other stuff if I talk about it. But let it just you know, suffice to say that there are solutions both through entities and other, you know, structures, and also some other strategies that help protect you. And I honestly don't think that it's overblown. If you're not a really big corporation, your chance of getting sued isn't as great as most Canadians would suspect.
Wow, that is true. That's true. Wow, we can't wait to learn more from it, and we'll take on that for next session, if you could elaborate a little more on that.
Yeah,
but for today, what great insights. Yes, maybe one last one that really a lot of listeners, even ourselves, we really enjoy it, is that we see that you have a good lifestyle and all that. So how can we use real estate to build a lifestyle of freedom for ourselves?
Well, that's really the key, and that's really the whole purpose of doing what we do, in my opinion, is to have that freedom from not having to go to a job every day, not having to answer to anybody. Just do the stuff you love, and there's no better way to do it than real estate. And I'll tell you why. You know, people always say, well, what about stocks? What about mutual funds? What about gold? And there's all these, there's a million different things you can invest in. The biggest distinction between real estate and all those other things, none of them have this, is that it creates cash flow. If I owned if I had $1 million worth of gold underneath my mattress right now, that's great. But I don't know how I'm going to pay my cell phone bill at the end of the month unless I sell some of that gold. I can have, you know, stocks, and there are dividend paying stocks, but whenever a stock pays out a dividend, and by the way, the stock market frightens the crap out of me. It is so manipulated. If you haven't seen the movie Inside Job and what's the other one? There's another new one that just came out. Anyway, the stock market is so manipulated. And, you know, we see, you know, the Bre-X scandal, and we see the Enron stuff. You're really just rolling the dice with stocks. But even if they weren't manipulated, let's pretend they're not for a minute. The biggest thing is if they do give you any cash flow, the stock actually goes down because they're paying out money. The stock goes down when it pays you out that dividend, and it's less valuable the day after it pays out. People always want to buy it before the dividend. So with real estate, I look at real estate, each property as being a piggy bank. And the beauty of this piggy bank is it spits out money without getting any smaller. The amount of money in there keeps going up because one, we have appreciation, and two, rent goes up with inflation, so rent keeps going up. So a home that gives a little bit of cash flow now, in 5 years from now, will presumably give more cash flow. So the piggy bank keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it's still giving you money. And so the real key, one, is to obviously build a portfolio of cash properties, and I can certainly help anybody do that. I've managed to do that. And like I said, instead of staying at your job to try and earn the money to keep doing that, basically you want to buy strategically. So the homes you buy today will help you buy your future homes. And you can keep building that portfolio without having to always keep saving more money. So it's not to say, hey, if you get a bonus at work, of course, invest that too. But let your homes help you buy more homes. That's really the key. And then most importantly, make sure you are really good at delegating, because I know people with they're millionaires and they have great money coming in, but they created a really big job for themselves where they're fixing toilets and they're getting calls in the middle of the night from tenants and they're running around and they're busy fixing things. And that's not why I got into real estate. I don't want to having all the money but not having a lifestyle. There's no advantage to that. So to me, it's all about having not just teams but the right people on your team. So I'd have a good mentor. I'd have definitely good property managers, good rehabbers to fix up your homes. When you have the right people in the right positions and the right properties, once again in good neighborhoods in the right cities, and you do things properly and with the right fundamentals in place, then you can really have a lifestyle for yourself, and you can have the ability to travel and not have to worry. The money is going to come in automatically. It becomes you couldn't turn it off. If I wanted to stop the money coming in that comes in from my rental properties at the end of the month, I couldn't do that even if I tried, as long as I have a good team that makes sure that my tenants are paying and that my properties are rented all the time. So the real answer is, one, be strategic with what you're buying, and two, delegate. Get other people to do the stuff that you shouldn't be doing. As a real estate investor, in my opinion, no real estate investor should be collecting their own rent. No real estate investor should be doing work on their properties. We should be, if we're in the building phase where we're getting more properties, we should be looking for more opportunities, figure out ways to maybe raise capital to expand a little bit faster. Doing things like that are a lot more strategic than doing minimum wage jobs. And so that's really the key, is have the right homes, right neighborhoods, right strategy, and definitely the right team. With those things in place, then you can do whatever you like. I'm an example of it. I love what I do every day. I love I love traveling. I love teaching. I have a new grandson. I love hanging out with him and my daughter. Those are things that I love doing. I love to give back. If I had to go and I don't even know how to work a screwdriver, so if I had to fix something, I'd be in really big trouble. But if I had to go chasing after tenants at the end of the month, I used to do it. I used to collect my own rent. If I had to do that again, I would absolutely not be. I would be very stressed out right now. So measure things in terms of happiness and joy, not in terms of dollars, and the rest of it will all fall into place. And that, I truly believe that.
Wow. What a word of wisdom. We appreciate it. Jennifer and looking at each other, and we can't believe we get this chance to talk to you, Mike, and it's been it's a real pleasure for you to answer all our questions. I know we had some tough questions for you, some easier ones, but I sure hope that the listeners did learn something today, because we did learn a heck lot. And so we are very thankful for you to be here with us today, Mike. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
No, just we're very honored that you spent some time talking with us today, and thank you very much for sharing your knowledge.
Well, thanks, first of all, for the opportunity. And, I'm always looking to pass on what I learned. I believe it's a lot of the information I have came from making a lot of expensive mistakes, and I don't believe other people need to make those mistakes. There's not really I'm glad I made them now, because I survived it and I learned a lot from it. Now I can help other people from things where I could have definitely done better had I had, the roadmap earlier on in the blueprint. But I've learned a lot over time, and I'm always happy to share it with other investors so they don't have to go through all the stress that I did earlier on. But good news is I came out on the other side, definitely with some bruises, but I'm very happy and it worked out pretty good. So, but I'm always happy to share.
Thank you again, and thank you for sharing again. And then we know we told the audience and us that you do offer free strategy session. And then for the listeners, if you want a strategy session, you can definitely contact Jennifer or Victor, and then we can help you set up a session with Mike. And Mike, you'll be happy to help them, right?
Absolutely, I'd love to, and I'd be happy to give them a strategy session over the phone or Skype, or even in person if they're located in somewhere warm where I hang out. I don't typically, you won't find me in Canada in the winter very often, but so I'm happy to do that. And I can also give them, a free strategy session with my one of my cross-border accounting specialists who can give you some ideas as to the tax consequences and how to protect yourself asset-wise. And I've got very, very good people on my team, and they're happy to give you a free strategy session too.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you very much, Mike. We're gonna conclude here for tonight, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, guys, and have a great night.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.